Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Warden. Welcome to the Boston 25 News Brian Walshe Murder Trial podcast. I'm joined by Boston criminal defense attorney Elyse Hershon as we analyze this trial. Elyse, thanks for joining me through this journey and what a road this has been. Let's jump right in. Well, just this morning, just a few hours ago, some big news. The defense rested its case, and we learned that all the way up until last night, the defense was going to call Brian Walshe, but in the 11th hour, they did not call him. Here is Brian Walshe this morning informing the court that he is not going to take the stand and testify.
Tell me in your own words, what are we discussing?
Whether I'll testify or not in my trial.
Have you made a decision about whether you wish to testify at this trial?
Yes, I have.
And what is your decision?
I will not testify.
Elyse, what a surprising moment that was for those of us in the courtroom. First off, finding that he was going to testify and then now he's not going to testify. What do you make out of this? What changed?
So it's hard to know if it was more of a public strategy that the defense was playing and keeping it a surprise, or if this was their plan all along. I doubt, based on how much publicity this case is, how significant it is, and first-degree murder is the most severe punishment possible in Massachusetts. We don't have the death penalty here. So life without parole is the most serious case with the most serious time, dying in prison. So I don't think that they just made the decision last night to pull him and have him not testify. I just think they didn't tell us, which is not surprising. They likely, a lot of times during a case, and we talked a little bit about this last week, a defense doesn't commit to an exact theory in their opening statement because you want to see how the evidence starts to develop, whether you're just trying to argue that the Commonwealth has not proven its case, or you're going to put on your own case as a defense attorney, meaning you're going to present evidence and witnesses and try to claim an affirmative defense. Right out the gate, the defense did an affirmative defense, basically sudden death. There was a sudden medical event. So we all expected that there would be at least some witnesses at that point to present evidence of that. Given there's no body, how do you say that? How do you prove that? I don't want to say, put the burden on the defense and say, how do they prove that? Because they don't have to prove anything. But why go with a theory that you're not going to present any evidence of? Why not just say the Commonwealth can't prove this because there's no body? They don't know how she was killed, or what the intent was if it was him. So that it's very bizarre.
Yeah, so the defense also rested its case, not calling any witnesses at all. And like you mentioned in opening statements, Larry Tipton came up with a theory on the case that said that Anna Walshe died of natural causes and she died on New Year's Day early in the morning, and that Brian was out washing dishes, came upstairs, found his wife dead in bed, and then he panicked. I want to show you a clip from opening statements, what Larry Tipton showed the jury just about a week and a half ago.
He nudged her now in a frantic and panic reaction to where she actually rolled off. It didn't make sense that somebody that he had just been with and enjoyed New Year's Eve into New Year's Day would suddenly be dead.
So, Elyse, other than the opening statements, the jury has not heard the defense's or Brian Walshe's theory of what happened to Anna after it was promised in the opening statements. Is that a problem?
So yes and no, which is such a lawyer answer. I think they left sort of a dangling carrot in opening statements. I wouldn't say they promised it per se that he was going to testify. No defense attorney really should ever promise that they're going to see something unless they've absolutely decided that that's what's going to happen. You can lose credibility with the jury. So even if you decide throughout the trial, you know what, we may not call our private investigator. Actually, we may not call our medical examiner because on our cross-examination, we made the exact points that we need. We don't need to complicate things by putting on a witness. But a defendant is a whole other thing. You don't want to promise that someone's going to testify or lead the jury to believe that he's going to testify and then pull him at the last minute. So I sort of think that they were never planning to call him at this point, which makes it a little bit strange that they presented the theory of sudden medical death and then didn't present any evidence to support it. I think essentially they're really going for reasonable doubt. They're saying it could have been a sudden medical event or it could have been first degree murder. Because it could be either of those things, that's an acquittal. That would be what I imagine their closing arguments to be. But if they put on evidence, if they have it, the defense, I mean, it can be a little stronger. So if they say, here's Brian Walshe, he's going to tell you what happened, obviously that's very impactful. But it also would have been a little bit messy, I think. He already admitted that he lied to police. All of his convictions come in, his art fraud, that was discussed.
Yeah.
But that comes in officially, and it also comes in that he officially pled guilty to the disposal of her body, which clearly, through the evidence, we know was dismemberment. So that's a really hard thing to get around. It's a hard thing to say, yes, I did that, but I'm going to stop right before you get to first degree murder because I didn't kill her.
Well, the defense tried for a directed verdict yesterday after the prosecution rested its case. And it's kind of a standard tactic, right? To say, well, the prosecution hasn't proven its case. Judge, we want you to essentially throw it out. The judge did not agree to do that. She denied the motion. She said, I have to look at this in the best light available to the Commonwealth. So this is going to be for the jurors to decide. But what about that issue? And it is something that is going to come up in closings. The defense saying, hey, the prosecution didn't prove its case. If you wanted to find out how Anna Walshe actually died, you didn't hear that from the Commonwealth. You don't know if she was shot, if she was stabbed, if she was poisoned, if she strangled. There's no evidence of that. It's a circumstantial case. But I guess you could say the same thing on the other side, that it's also circumstantial if you're saying she died of natural causes, because there's no evidence at all how Anna Walshe actually died. The medical examiner said, without a body, I can't rule on cause and manner of death. So what about that? If the jury is going to have to look at other things, the totality of the case, and they're going to have to use their common sense, and they need to rule beyond a reasonable doubt, but not beyond all doubt in the case. So I know you're a defense attorney, but just from what you've been able to watch and what you're looking for to see if something has been proven, do you think the Commonwealth proved its case here?
I really don't. I think that without a body, it's hard to prove a homicide in the first place because all of the homicide trials that I've done, they've all had death certificates. They've all said manner of death, homicide. I think maybe once or twice it said unknown, but there's always evidence that it was third-party trauma there, and injuries. So they don't have any of that. They don't have manner and cause of death. I think the prosecution could have come out with a theory of their own. They would not have been able to prove the theory beyond a reasonable doubt. But I think, like we all were waiting to see about that kitchen knife that we thought had blood on it, and that was the one tool left behind, or the one weapon left behind. Maybe that was the murder weapon, but that never came through. So I think the jury is waiting there and sitting for, the silver bullet to say, okay, tell us what he did to her. We know what he did to her post-mortem, and it was grotesque. Well, did he kill her? But because the Commonwealth doesn't even have a theory of how she died, the defense really did not have to present their own theory at all. They could have come forward and said the same thing that we're saying right now. If the Commonwealth can't prove how he killed her or how she died, how are they going to prove that he killed her? It's a bizarre set of circumstances.
Well, we got a little bit of a hint here, and some of the conferences that were done in open view of all of us. One of them happened yesterday. Another one happened this morning. Yesterday, the Commonwealth addressed it. This was over the directed verdict, where they said Brian Walshe that night was the only adult in the house. There's evidence of how did she put it? She had evidence of that Anna Walshe had died a violent death from the bloodstains in the house. And they talked about the knife today, late this afternoon in a conference, and the judge brought it up, and she talked about breadcrumbs and following the breadcrumbs. And there was more, they talked more about that knife. And even though there was no DNA on the knife, it did test positive for the presence of blood, and there was no further testing on it. And they coupled that, the prosecutor was trying to couple that with the searches, the internet searches that were done about how to get blood off a knife, putting a knife in a dishwasher to clean it, I think to get rid of blood, maybe DNA as well. And the judge, they were talking about language, what she's going to tell the judge in jury instructions tomorrow. And the judge brought up this idea that there's a reasonable inference, and if you follow the breadcrumbs, you will see it. That's not there's no direct evidence, though. That's not direct evidence. And that could be a hangup, you're saying, for jurors.
Absolutely. I think there's a big difference between a reasonable inference and pure speculation. You know, a lot of people are saying, well, how can the defense say she died of a sudden medical event? They have no evidence of that. It's possible, but they have no evidence of that. What does the prosecution have? They have a knife that is the one thing in that entire dumpster, basically, that doesn't have confirmed DNA on it and doesn't have her blood on it. Did he somehow clean that so much that it got rid of all the DNA? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. If they had the evidence, and if the evidence was there, they would have found it. I don't think Brian Walsh is any sort of chemist or scientist or knows about chemicals and how to remove things based on how rudimentary this whole thing was done, and how blatant he was on the videos, and how, using tools that are not the most sophisticated. Meaning like not scalpels, they were shed tools. So I think that the Commonwealth is missing a huge piece. They wanted the jury to make leaps from one piece of evidence to the next. And I don't know if there's even a soft path that connects them.
Well, there is, though, we're kind of, I'm going to have to wrap it up because we're running out of time, but there are the internet searches, and you see Brian Walsh in real time disposing of evidence. You see him with the trash bags. You see him buying those cleaning supplies. That's consciousness of guilt. It can be argued. Again, you think it's not good enough, that they need something more than that.
Yes, I think because the Commonwealth has a burden, like you said, beyond a reasonable doubt, but it is defined, and the judge will say this when she gives the jury instructions. It is the highest degree of certainty in human affairs. That's pretty sure. We're not talking about the most likely scenario or make an educated guess or piece these two things together, and this is the most likely scenario. All of those mean acquittal. That's a hard thing to conceptualize because people like to make these decisions or have these thoughts and say, oh, he definitely did it. Because if he wasn't guilty, why would he have done that? You sort of have to put that aside. You can bring your common experiences to being a juror, but you can't just ignore the fact that there's no actual evidence of it. And I don't think they really came out with any direct evidence that he knew about the affair either. So
Okay.
that type of motive is not that firmly standing.
Interesting stuff. We're going to have to wrap it up for now. Closing statements are set for Friday. They're reconvening at 9 o'clock, so sometime Friday morning, closing statements will be made. Jury gets the case on Friday. Any prediction on not what the verdict will be, but when there might be a verdict?
I feel as though it's not going to take them that long. It was very much more complicated in the Karen Reed case because there were 3 or 4 different theories of death and then subsets underneath each of them. This is, did he intentionally and premeditatively kill her or not? There's no manslaughter, there's no self-defense, there's no sort of balancing against the other charges. There's one charge and one theory, which is first degree. So it should be really interesting to see.
Do you think possible verdict Friday, or do you think we're going through the weekend and maybe Monday?
It's always so hard to predict. The jury instructions do take quite a bit of time. I imagine they're going to get at least an hour for their closing arguments, and then there's usually a break, and then charge instructions could be an hour, sometimes 2 hours. So they may not get this case till after lunch, or they might deliberate through lunch. They may go to, I think they're going to go into next week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to say Monday after lunchtime. Elyse Hershon, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all for joining us on this podcast. This has been great going over all these legalities with Elyse, and she's been helping me during the trial too. We've been analyzing a little bit away from this camera, and she's been helping me just keep in sight some of the important points that are being raised here. Elyse, I don't know when we're going to be back, but we're definitely going to be back when this trial wraps up. It's not over yet, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.